I'm so pleased to be with you this afternoon to discuss one of my favorite questions in the Sterling framework. What is your organizational structure? I really enjoy all of the questions around this area because one, they're usually visual, and I like things that are visual, and they are so valuable because they describe the governance, they describe the leadership system and how it cascades to the general work. So much of it can be seen in various shapes or charts. You can see the structure question on this organizational profile graphic under organizational relationships on the left-hand side. And we remember from our past sessions and from our work that it is the starting point. It sets the context of your organization for understanding, and it identifies assets and areas of more need and more needed information. Now, this should be an accurate description of your organization, and it should not be the glamour shot. So, section P1B1 of the profile asks the what of your leadership system. What are its structures and its mechanisms? What's the workflow? So this can be very complicated with many senior leaders, VPs, and assistants and managers working through a hierarchy of titles, or it can be quite simple and quite direct. By the way, I would like to say that a proceed from all these cartoons or graphics that I am using today, there's a donation that will be made to the Ukrainian Relief from the artists that created them, and they're in the Dreams Time company. So the organizational profile asks, what is the organizational leadership structure? What is the governance structure? What structures and mechanisms make up your leadership system? And then what are the reporting relationships among your governance board, your senior leaders, your parent organization as appropriate? And it should be truthful. And to emphasize this point, I'd like to tell you a story, how this played out in an educational organization. Now, it was not my educational organization, but it was another school district. I was called in by the school board to help with some principal and other mid-level supervisors because there was some dissatisfaction with a similarly ranked staff member. And apparently, this person was reporting to the superintendent about the performance levels of principals and managers and supervisors and others, and also had begun to assume some duties of some vacant positions, and also assuming a salary increase. Now, you know that could be a problem. And it was not yet voted upon by the school board. Lots of leaders were not so happy, but the rationale was, hey, we're saving money. So, like a good Sterling examiner, I asked for the organizational chart. The chart showed this mid-level supervisor was clearly out of line and out of lane and also out of a swim lane if there was one. Oh, and by the way, they told me that chart was out of date and HR was designing another one. So I asked for a job description. Well, you might guess the answer to that one as well. It was out of date and it was being redesigned by HR. In the meantime, the organizational structure, everybody in it is not very happy. Now, my purpose for the story is to emphasize the importance of accurate organizational structures. Similar to Jim Collins' statement, it is the right work by the right people in the right positions for that work. Out of their lane folks may need to recheck their seat on the bus and the org chart. So it's all about alignment. The order of the operations that defines the positions and describes the work required to achieve an organization's objectives and vision. Key elements include the roles, the responsibilities, the information flow, and how certain processes are directed in order to achieve the goals of an organization. So depending on your source of information for how to design these structures, there can be 4, there can be 7, or there can be 8 or more. So it varies depending on your source. The most commonly used charts are the functional, the divisional, the flat, and the matrix. And as always, there are always new or hybrid models. Our case study this past year is a good example of what an org structure looks like and then what it sounds like. This is a functional organizational chart, and this is what it sounds like if it's read from the written text. The president is the chief executive officer and reports to the chancellor of the college system. The chancellor of the college system reports to the board of trustees. So you can learn so much from the organizational chart and also from the written description. Now, depending on the shape of the chart, you can determine possible strengths and weaknesses. For example, if you have a flat org chart that's typically seen as a positive for its distribution of leadership and its communication and innovation, it may be difficult to sustain highly qualified people who have expertise in their field because other organizations may want to offer them more. So they're a big attraction for competitors, and what happens is it increases your turnover rate. Functional organizations produce specialization, they produce competence in their employees, but typically may have trouble working cross-functionally, often experiencing some silos. Documenting the structure is important for the performance excellence journey. Organizational charts, written descriptions, diagrams, tables, and models all tell the what of your leadership and governance system. And as always, please use your core values. Accurately tell the what of your organization. Accurately tell what the structures, the mechanisms, and the workflow is. You can use a variety of established or innovative forms to tell your story of your organization. Thank you.
All right, good job, Mary Beth. Nice, very nice presentation. I appreciate everything you shared. So I did take some summary notes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, let's see if I got it right. Focus on creating an organizational structure that is based on the facts, the complex and the simple workflows, the relationships, and the what. What of the leadership system pertains to leadership oversight, governance requirements, parent organizations, and/or stakeholders. So that kind of helps define that structure,
Yeah.
right? Understanding that. Okay. And then consider the order of alignment for fulfilling customers' expectations and organizational goals. Because the organization profile, even though it's, or the organization structure, sorry, even though it's on a piece of paper and it's documented, really shows the flow, kind of like the workflow of the organization as you somewhat described with your story, right?
Right.
So you need to think about that flow when you're documenting your organization structure. And then different forms of organization structures are matrix, flat, functional, divisional, and there are others, right?
Yes.
I know that you and I had talked at one point in time about consultative, you know, when I was working in a one of the accounting firms, it was a very consultative structure, slightly different. So there are alternatives. And then, you know, the goal is to choose the one that accurately reflects your organization's flow. Documenting the structure is important because it ensures full understanding of the what and the how of your organization. Got it?
Right.
Okay.
You have it. Great summary. Thank you.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to start out with some questions.
Okay.
That I already have. How frequently should we review the organization structure?
Well, I would say initially, if you're starting an organization, you would look and design your organizational structure to fit the work that you do. After that, during your strategic planning, there's a section about workforce and capabilities and capacity. So I would definitely review the org chart then. And also, if you're hiring new positions, and you're adding departments, or you're adding a division, or you're taking on new work, I definitely think that reviewing your org chart to see if it will fit the work that you do is really very important.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would you look for to determine if your current organizational structure needs to be changed?
It's under development. It's still in HR. Nobody knows about it. It's not accurate. People aren't getting along well. Like the example that I shared with you, you've got some people with hanging on to their knowledge and not sharing. And so if you have some of those things, you might need to look at your reporting structure and how the work flows, how communication flows, and maybe take that leap and maybe try a new structure.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I could see how that could even lead to like some transformative activities, right?
Yes. Hence the flat organizational chart.
Right. Or if you're looking for a more collaborative organization, you wouldn't necessarily go with functional. You would pick like a matrixed organization.
Yes.
Yeah. So it depends, like you said, on the strategy you're trying to drive.
And the type of company. If you have a virtual company, you might definitely look for that matrix system.
Yeah, that's true. Can you provide an example or examples of supporting mechanisms for the organizational structure? You had mentioned there's supporting mechanisms, so I'm just wondering if you could provide some examples.
Well, a lot of times when people describe their leadership system and how it works, they use graphics. They may use charts. They may use a flow chart that's separate from the organizational chart. The other thing, mechanisms or anything that supports your organizational structure. It could be if you have a partnership with a corporation or a university, that while they're not on your org chart, they may be on certain boards or advisory boards or informal approval for things or recommendations, funding. So any of those that are really not in the reporting structure, they don't have a position in the organization, but they have influence, and we consider them leadership.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, good. All right. Can you provide an example of how an organizational structure has impacted core values or vice versa?
I would, first of all, the example I gave was one where, they clearly were not collaborating. Another example, if you select your core values and let's just say collaboration is one of your core values, and you have, as we talked about before, a functional org chart, right? So just by the structure, your core value is going to have some trouble becoming operational, because the disadvantages could be the silo effect, or territorial, where they would just want all the information that they have in their own department and maybe not willing to share. So that could be one example. You could also have something, let's say, where you have a core value for loyalty, let's just say, to the organization, and you have a flat structure, and people are gaining that expertise and that fame because they're like in the top leadership position, and perhaps that core value of loyalty would be tested by each and everyone who is on that leadership structure at the top line. So the other thing that I would you could back into it and select the org chart that matches the core values of your organization from the beginning. That might help put your core values into the life of your organization.
Ah, good perspective. I really like that. Yes.
Yeah,
And I think really paying attention, because a lot of times we just think the org structure, the org chart, the proverbial org chart is just something that you pull together just to see who reports to who, right? But it
right.
really is a framework. It's a backbone that shows how the organization operates, how the workflow or the work flows or the communications flow or who's collaborating with who. It's much more than just a document on a piece of paper to see who works for who. Yeah.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of my, as I said in the beginning, it's one of my favorite questions in the Sterling framework because
Yeah.
it tells so much.
Right. It tells, yes, it could actually identify challenges.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Especially
So,
when strategy is not aligned. Yeah. Or expectation. Very good. Well, thank you for your time, Mary Beth. We're out of time,
all right.
actually. So we'll wrap it up. Just a couple of reminders to wrap up. Don't forget, check in at thesterlingcouncil.com or floridasterling.com for additional content from today's session, including my summary notes. There should also be a link in the chat window for you to get to the summary notes more quickly. The video will be posted in YouTube by tomorrow, and join us on March 22nd, next Tuesday, for a session with Anthony Napolitano on describing your assets and defining your regulatory environment. Anthony is a Sterling Master Examiner. He is also lead IT governance and process improvement specialist at DTCC. So feel free to join us early as well at noon next Tuesday for the replay of Mary Beth's presentation from today. Until then, I wish you all a very, very happy week ahead. And thanks for joining today. Appreciate it.